Hello and welcome back to Mosi, and welcome for the first time to those who are joining us. So this is kind of a different one today. It's episode 6 of Foreign Domestic Unfiltered. I'm here with my co-host Ramon Mile, and we snuck someone else in here as well. We have Damonni Farley, who is joining us today. He's a local community activist here in Schenectady. You're also Director of Community Outreach for the Schenectady City School District. You're founder and president of Common Thread Consulting, Inc., as well as City Council candidate.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here, man.
I didn't miss that in there.
Nope. I think you got it all covered.
Well, welcome. We were just talking offline, we're going to run through kind of our quick hits, talk on our main topics, and then we'll circle back with you and get into the meat and potatoes of the City Council run. So, do you want to start off with your quick hit first, or what?
Yeah, I mean, we can hop into one. Let's see. I think that what I wanted to start off with today was talking about Brazil. Our boy Lula da Silva, he had his corruption charges annulled in court, and he might possibly make a run in 2022 here against Bolsonaro. And hey, that's a good thing for the left. We all seen what's been coming out of Brazil. Obviously, extreme conservatism, and I mean, honestly, just straight up authoritarianism. They're second in the world behind us in coronavirus deaths. They mishandled their situation quite a bit there. So there's a ton of work that needs to be done. And he obviously, he put in that work. He cut poverty in half in the years that he had his reign going there. And I didn't really get into too much of the political analysis of it. I'm still reading some stuff coming out of Brazil. Some people are saying that he might run. There's actually a judge in the capital that's attempting to appeal his annulment. So I don't really know how that works. I don't know how their court system's set up. I'm pretty sure in America, once you get your sentence commute, that's it. They can't be like, wait, I'm appealing you being released. Right. So I don't know how that works. We'll see how it plays out. But
it still gets kicked to their Supreme Court, essentially.
Okay. But he's on the street free right
He
now.
is on the street free.
That's my point.
Right. And I mean, you're right. When he did run the country, they had a nice wave of progressive politics, and that really, to his electorate, that really endeared them to him. Mm-hmm. But he got caught up in the whole corruption scandal, which he directly didn't have any, workings in.
Yeah, they were saying that he was receiving kickbacks from a construction company that renovated one of his homes for free. There wasn't any real hard evidence. Like we were saying, the right wing regime in Brazil, it's very similar to America. A lot of the court system, the judicial system it's extremely right wing. It's just like how we have the Heritage Foundation here. Mm-hmm. That's. There's Mitch McConnells all around the world, folks. Okay, these dudes know what their aims are. Okay, the left usually tries to win the hearts and minds of the people, and a lot of the time the right wing's like, well, we're just gonna go take the judges.
Well, Bolsonaro wasn't his nickname the Trump Tropics of the Trump.
Wow.
Yeah,
big military guy.
Yeah, and that was what he ran on, was that he was going to stamp out corruption, and he was rule with an iron fist type thing, and he turned out to be just as bad as the last fella.
That always goes well, right?
Right, yeah. But, that's something positive to look at, because honestly, he really has mishandled, Bolsonaro has mishandled the crisis in Brazil. In terms of, parallels with America, Brazil don't even have a good tangible rollout of their vaccines yet. Mm-hmm. And there's a ton of new strains that, have been really ravaging towns. Manaus, which is one of the bigger cities in the Amazonian region, it's pretty much, there's not much else there except this city where they're at. They had nearly something like 2/3 of the population caught coronavirus, but this new strain, the Brazilian strain they're calling it, has now a ton of the rest of the people caught that there. So they're struggling with the coronavirus as well as
it's the Brazilian strain. I didn't even hear about it.
Wow. Yeah. There's a bunch of...
There's a couple of different strains.
There's a few countries that have some kind of nasty strains popping out of them. I believe I read the other day there's one coming out of New York City that's pretty scary too. Mm-hmm. There's all these variants. I forget the numbers. It's B11.7. Right.
Well, there's a South African strain. There's a UK. It's not good. But so we're over the other side of that, I think, here in America. Hopefully. Yeah.
Hopefully.
Right.
All right, so you good on Lula?
Oh yeah, I'm all set.
That's a good quick hit. No, I like that. We definitely sent that to each other when we saw the news too. We're like, oh, Lula's out. That's good to see.
Oh yeah.
So my first quick hit is I wanted to speak about the royal mess, not just because I'm an Irishman, but as I was chatting to the lads offline here, I saw a few of the clips, and obviously I saw the discussion around it. And it's a mixture of, celebrity and royalty, which kind of royalty is that at this point. The British people hold up royalty as their main celebrity. I would say there's no actual function to it anymore. But what was apparent to me is, and I see it all the time online. I probably spend too much time and too much weight on what people say online at times, but just the way that the right courted, the anti-Meghan rhetoric right after the interview itself was, I was like, why are they doing that? And is that because, this has come the right in America, like you have your Charlie Kirks, you have your, your other talking heads, literally, railing on Meghan. Is that something to do with race? Is it something to do with her own privilege? It was, and then you tie it into the fact that, okay, this is the royal family we're talking about. So, England at one point was obviously the domineering force here, but they'd rather, stick up for the royal family and everything that they've done, and rail on a girl who's speaking about the issues that she had. I mean, people say, oh, well, you were a princess, but that doesn't exclude you from, feeling bad or feel like you're being bullied or feel like you're being trapped. And it was just gross to see. I mean, obviously there was a lot of funny stuff that came out of it, and I enjoyed like people wanting to cancel the royal family. But people also shouldn't be surprised that they're a bunch of shitheads, because
that's what monarchy is.
At the end of the day, like the whole institution is built around bloodlines and privilege. So like, if you have somebody coming from another country, one of the questions they were asked, I believe someone asked Meghan and Harry was, what color will the baby be? You know what I mean?
Wow.
Which, if they're asking that, they obviously have no self-awareness to what's.
Oh,
it's pretty sad.
Yeah. So
and they also have a lot of confidence in Harry's ability to predict the future and see like what's going on.
Right.
It's pretty.
Yeah. Wow, the baby was going to be redheaded, like Harry. But yeah, I thought just as like a social, experiment or view on everything, it was just crazy to see like the right-wing media attack her.
Right. And the thing that was most interesting for me was, right, so I didn't really watch it, like Damonni was saying earlier offline. I caught some clips, whatever. I didn't want to, the culture war stuff, I try to avoid it, right? But so it's interesting to me, right? Like, nobody came to the defense of the royal family when like Prince Andrew was literally like twitching in the chair getting interviewed about the Epstein stuff. Right. Or, no one came to his defense then. You know what I mean? Everyone was like, oh, yeah, that guy's a creep. Screw the royal family, even conservatives. And then like the minute it becomes a race issue, they're like, oh, I'm on that side. Yeah. Like immediately, like just reflexively, and that's what and the thing is, like, I'm not that kind of person. I try to be charitable in what people's arguments are. You know what I mean? But it's like with most things, like this Dr. Seuss stuff, the Mr. Potato Head, it's like, man, y'all are just playing games out here. Right. You're not even trying anymore.
Yeah, it is. They're distracting with the culture war stuff, and without having to get to real issues. Yeah.
What you see is how one's proximity to whiteness really determines their value in certain spaces, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what's going on with Meghan. It's like, so people will really talk about, like, I heard people saying things like, well, that's family business, family business. And I'm like, well, two things can be true. Like, I mean, I have issues in my family like everyone does, and right. I wouldn't want everyone to know. Mm-hmm. However, I would think that we'd be more concerned with the fact that even someone who is privileged, right?
Right.
A princess, racism, right? Sexism, bullying, right? Those things, your privilege won't shield you from
exactly.
those, right? And it just becomes relative, right? So now this is what racism looks like in the royal family, right? We're just used to what it looks like
on a day-to-day.
Yeah, being a regular Joe Schmo, right? So,
yep. Yeah. So yeah, I thought that was an interesting little quick hit for this week. You got anything else on the quick hits?
No, I mean, not really. Just for the sake of the time crunch, I think we should just get right into the stimulus.
Let's do it.
You know what I mean? I wanted to hit Cuomo, but trust me, King Cuomo, I'm coming for you next week. We're gonna have a nice segment. We're gonna carve it out real nice for you.
Yeah, I mean, he's under a lot of pressure right now.
I think that it'll be good if we wait because, you know, it's just a roller coaster ride right now. So I'm sure like
changing day to day.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's probably a lot more to talk about by the time. Yeah.
Hopefully not more people. Jeez.
Well, yeah, hopefully not. That's terrible. But all right, so yeah, let's hop right into it. You know, we took a couple of weeks off. We took a week off there, folks. Sorry, I got a little sick. You know, Peadar, you know, he took.
I enjoyed the downtime.
Yeah, we needed a little break here. We came out the gate hot, but we're going to pick right up where we left off, getting into the $1.9 trillion stimulus here. So it finally, you know, it passed through. Biden signed it. I'm sure that I seen all the memes online. Everybody, Stimmy's already hitting bank accounts. Everybody's feeling good. You know, this is big government in action, folks, when you need it, you know. So I just wanted to parse through a bunch of the changes of things that got whittled down, some things that got unexpectedly put through that people didn't think was going to make it, you know, in relation to the last podcast episode. So let's see. I'll kick off here. So unemployment benefits got extended through September, but it originally was supposed to be $400 a week. It's now only $300. So you know, that's Joe Manchin once again. That was him pushing for that. He was sitting there with his arms crossed. He was vocal about it. He got in the media and he whittled it down to 300. And then you know, the Progressive Caucus was able to sort of across the hall there from the House with their folks push it to reach out for an extra month for September because it was supposed to lapse in July. So extra month there. It kind of almost pans out, not really. And the only issue I see with that, you know, when you do the inside politics on it all, is the only thing that's concerning about that is it's not tied to any markers, right? So like if unemployment, if there's another wave or, you know, anything happens, a market crash, it's not tied to anything. So what that means is if people remember back in the 2008 crash, you know, they passed the stimulus, they boosted, you know, they passed some unemployment legislation. They had to go back, I think it was like 13 different times in different sessions because they kept passing small windows. Now, I'm worried about this here because, in my opinion, this is a bigger disaster than that '08 crash was because you have, you know, people are actually, it's consumer confidence is an issue too. It's not just people's money. So if we reach this deadline in September and the job market still isn't recovered, we're going to be going into Labor Day weekend with, you know, Congress on vacation here with things lapsing. And it's not just the unemployment benefits. Pretty much everything is set to end in September. What is it? Eviction protections, I think, got extended out through then. I'm actually not 100% on that, so actually disregard that. I'm not 100%. But I do know for a fact that what was it? They put through a $10,200 tax credit waiver that applies towards your 2020 unemployment income that you received, and that's huge, folks, because what that essentially is going to do is it's going to cut down on about $1,000 to $1,500 bill a lot of people would have got from filing their taxes this year if they owed, or then if they didn't owe, that's just more money you're going to get back. So that was huge. That was a big unexpected thing that people were talking about that in April of 2020 when they were concerned about, you know, the $600 unemployment benefit and it being taxable. So, you know, that was huge. And we can thank Ronald Reagan for that, for taxing unemployment. Don't know how we haven't changed that yet, but that's for another day. And let's see, you know, we got the child tax credit. Huge.
I love that.
Huge, folks. Huge. I mean, this is one area where, I mean, you know, this is monumental. The way that they did it, this is a bipartisan thing, actually. I know it doesn't seem that way because like no Republicans voted for this, but there's actually a significant number of them in the Senate and the House who were amicable to this. You know, obviously we talked about Mitt Romney had his own version of it that he wanted to put through, but so it's like we referred to before. I think it's $300 for child. It's a $3,600 whole credit for the whole year, refunded, fully refundable back to you. The payments are going to start in July. $350 for a child 5 and under, $300 for a child 6 through 17. Mm-hmm. So
and like all of these are means, not obviously the unemployment, but the actual $1,400 are means tested, right? what's the cutoff? It's like 100, and if you make as a couple, if it's
60 or 180, something like that.
Well, that's for the stimulus checks. Is 75,000 is the cutoff for the child tax credit? It's $200,000 for you to get that fully refundable one for an individual, and 400,000 for a household. And then anyone who makes above that still gets, anyone who gets that cutoff that doesn't get the actual fully refundable payment starting in July, they still get to claim the $2,000 child tax credit come tax time next year. So it's good because, we talked about it and I was like, I don't know, that seems like kind of a high ceiling for 400,000, but sometimes you want to make policies like this somewhat universal so there isn't too much pushback from the upper middle class and whatnot. But
benefit of it.
And you didn't really need to do it to convince any of those voters to want to be, for this to be popular with them. Really what you're doing by putting that in there, by leaving that, for those upper middle class folks, what you're doing is you're setting a good base for this to be renewed next year because it only lasts a year. So you're you're cutting off, nipping it at the bud, the argument people are going to make next year. Yeah, exactly. So smart. There's some great folks. I don't know who's like, and that's another thing that's interesting. Like, no one's stepping forward, taking credit for some of these things. I think there's just some dope staffers, honestly.
Yeah.
They're the
I really think there is.
That's how it always happens.
It is,
man. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how it always happens.
Yeah.
But not to be the downer of it, but it's just so it's like supported by 2/3 of Americans, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you would think that if there was ever something where our Republican counterparts would say, "Hey, I support this," like it would be this, and it just it to me it's telling that even something so popular, something that the people are wanting in a time of such need. Don't you want to be on the right side of this? You know what I mean? It's kind of like so. It is.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that.
It's just glaring that
I think it was the fourth most popular bill that was put up that graphic last week of everything that's been passed. I think there was 3 other bills in the history of that were polled on. And this was the fourth most popular. 75% of people wanted it to go through. But from looking into it and kind of looking how people have been voting, for a while now in the Senate, in 2008 when Obama did the relief plan, the Republicans, wanted infrastructure work done, but nobody, and in that plan there was stuff for infrastructure. They all had their wish list on, the Republicans, but none of them voted for it.
Right.
So again, it's just another instance of them just wanting to, be the obstructionists within there, even though that's going to help their constituents in the end.
But what's interesting is that bills passed, then you have people kind of taking out little piece of the bill and supporting that, right? And like I say, and then you want to get in front of it when it's like, okay, well, my constituents will really benefit from this part of the bill, so let me kind of tie my name to this on Twitter or something. But it's
exactly.
It's good.
Yeah, and the child tax credit is, I said it to you, it's kind of like what we have in Ireland with children's allowance. So per child, you get money each month for your child, and it goes a long way to helping people. And it gives it a bit of a safety net.
Right. And it's a basic thing. Like every other first world country does this, right? Because what it does is it helps eliminate child poverty. We saw all the congressional budget offices, all their studies that they performed on this. And, at best, it was this total package, this total $1.9 trillion stimulus is projected to, at best, cut child poverty in half. The child tax credit, the fully refundable one, is supposed to do 33% all on its own. So, this is groundbreaking stuff. Regardless of how people feel about it, deficit hawkery and all that other stuff, which by now, you'd think that we have proof that just doesn't exist. We're talking about fiat currency. No one wants to read about modern monetary theory or any of these things that, really prove all these Reaganomic concepts false. And at the end of the day, it's like, well, you're talking about childhood poverty. This isn't This isn't really something that we should be like negotiating over.
Right.
You know what I mean? We're talking about hungry children. This is easy stuff.
If it was shiny jets,
easy stuff,
right? If it was shiny jets for the Pentagon, it's okay, you know.
Right. And then, in our relation to what we were saying with Lula and, or Obrador or all these other guys, like that's why these people were popular in South America. They killed child poverty. They basically came in and obliterated it in like 4 years. Their right-wing counterparts couldn't stomach it. And, that's when you see all these coups happen and stuff. But my point is, if all these countries that the average American like considers third or second world can do it, it should be done here too, man. This isn't rocket science. You shouldn't want any kid in your country to be hungry. Plain and simple, regardless of, people try to blame choices parents make, blah, blah, blah. Then you overwhelm whatever you need to do to make sure it doesn't happen, to try to meet, get beyond that hurdle. Mm-hmm. So here, just real fast. What was the other? Here we go. The other point I wanted to make about the child tax credit as well is, again, like it's July through the end of the year. It's going to be 6 months of payout, and then the back end of it is going to be refunded. So there is no mechanism for this payment to continue into 2022. So that's something that people have to keep in mind. Remember that when you're coming tax season. And, obviously, I'm pretty sure nobody making household $400,000 or more is listening to this podcast, so they can figure it out.
Sponsor us if you are.
Yes,
please.
Yeah, I mean, I liked it. I liked a lot of the things that were in this. Obviously, I was a little bit disappointed that the $15 minimum wage didn't make it. But, one thing to note is, all the economists talking about how, this is, raising, so many people out of poverty, like 30%. It's imagine having the added bonus of, raising that minimum wage as well for these people would have had a monumental, effect. Mm-hmm. But I'm happy with what's in it, but people shouldn't rest on their laurels and continue to push people. The only thing I'm kind of worried about is, is this going to be the only worthy piece of legislation that they're able to pass this year? I know they have big aspirations with an infrastructure bill. You have HR 1 and HR 4 that they're putting through around voting rights and stuff. Which
the PRO Act.
Yeah. Yep. So again, that's kind of harks back to the filibuster discussion, and should we blow it up? Yeah, we probably should. Will it be reformed at all? We'll see, but with some of these centrist Democrats or I like to call them light Republicans, diet Republicans. I don't know. There'll be some movement on it, but unless we can do something like that, you're going to have like this one monumental bill in a presidency that'll get done. I mean, the only one that you can say that, or the two monumental bills I would say that Obama did, was obviously the affordable health care and then his stimulus package.
Right. And that's the thing, right? That's the holding pattern too. Like this is the nature of why when we have these filibuster discussions, and we can do a whole podcast on how undemocratic the Senate itself is, but this is a pattern not only for Democratic administrations, but when Republicans are in power, it's the same thing. Like Trump did one big thing, two arguably. He had his big tax cut, and then he like kind of built some of a wall. That was it. Everything else that he did, if you actually pay attention to it, and if you look through it was all executive orders and things that he did himself. They didn't really pass anything through Congress. No. Very little. As much as he touts, I did the most, blah, blah, blah. Go look at the number of how much actual legislation passed through the House and the Senate while he was president. It's actually like record low, for the modern America. They did nothing. But why is that, folks? Because they don't actually have an agenda. It's just tax cuts. That's it. And then back to the culture war. That's pretty much where we're at. So,
but I also think about we talking about lifting people out of poverty. Poverty on paper looks different than poverty in real life. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And so when we look at medium income of people and the reality of things that impact you, like food deserts and lack of transportation and all of these quality of life things. I'm sure we'll get into more of that later. But with a pothole, people don't make the correlation between why that pothole. Someone hitting the pothole in their car, and then what ends up happening. Then where does that money come from them to fix a tire, and then how does that impact their overall ability to take care of their family? We have a lot of people that are, above the poverty line on paper. But the reality is they're not even, minor crisis, if you will, from,
being homeless.
Or starving.
Yeah, paycheck to paycheck.
So, yeah.
I mean, yeah, there was a ton of studies. What was it? For the last 3 years, there's a new one. The number keeps moving around, but it's like this amount of Americans can't afford like a $700 emergency. Like, yeah, that's exactly what you're talking about. And that's the thing. That's the difference between like what you're saying. People who understand these things, read the data, the studies, and actually read about the macroeconomics and understand living among, and being one of those people myself at random points in my life. I just got laid off last year. People realize, real life poverty and living paycheck to paycheck aren't that far apart. You know what I mean? It's really not, there's not a huge gap there. Me and you were talking about that, Peadar, I think it was on Wednesday. And that's something that, that was why I was excited to have you on, because I know that, you understand that exactly what we were just talking about. And you don't hear a lot of local politicians talk about that. You know what I mean? It's a very important.
It's almost, that contextual experience and not being too far away from the issues, and I think that happens too often. And, to some of their credit, there's a path to get into politics, and it means, making friends, compromising on your values, really being, being appealing to the good old boys club, and then, and then they punch your ticket, So it's like, the cost of, getting the blessing of the powers that be, if you will, really is, well, you can't be connected to the norm, right? You can't be connected to the everyday citizen, because if you do, then you're going to know that this is BS, and then, we can't let that happen, right?
Well, I was glad to see that in the bill as well, we were talking about poverty and hunger. There was some items in there for like the SNAP program and things like that, which will, go a long way. Do you know, in terms of how much was allocated for, was it $350 billion to state and local aid?
Right.
And one of the detractors and one of the dissenting opinions on that was like, and I mentioned it to you, was that, this has been the slowest that a lot of these agencies and state and local government has had to run. So why did they need this $350 billion?
Right.
But at the end of the day, we're like, the ability to be prepared for something is something that's massive. And we saw how we weren't prepared for something like the coronavirus. Trump dismantled the, pandemic preparedness.
Because who needs that?
Right. And you're kind of seeing that now. So at least put money away in the coffers for something like this. And I'd be interested to ask you, I mean, you're involved in the schools and stuff. And obviously, from what I was reading right before the pandemic hit, or right around when the pandemic hit, the Schenectady School Board had to, cut their budget quite extensively and lay off some people as well. How is the outlook of what's happened with the stimulus and the aid that's been granted? How is that going to, how do you see that affecting Schenectady schools?
Well, hopefully, and I say hopefully, knowing that it's going to take some effort to bring people back, and a lot of people lost their jobs, and unfortunately, it was, people that live in the city, right? Live in the city, and marginalized people, some of our paras, and people of color, because there's been some just recent efforts to really diversify the school district, right? There's tons of research that shows why it's important, for our students. But so being that these efforts have been kind of taken on more recent, that means that the people with the least amount of seniority, right, are going to be so it was kind of like insult to injury. But now that so the school board made some decisions based on information that they were getting, and predicting, a far larger cut than what we actually received.
Right.
And so it was kind of like, the theory on that was, if we don't do this now, then a couple months down the line we're going to have to cut double the amount of people. So that's not the case now. So I think that people will get back into their jobs, and hopefully it will help our students and our families. But the truth of the matter is, even before the pandemic, our students, our school district is completely underfunded. Even by the foundation formula there, we're still not getting what we're supposed to get.
Right. Yeah, I read all the studies that came out of that when they did the cuts, and they were showing the dramatic effect that it had, on Schenectady compared to, like, say, Shenandoah.
It's crazy because it's like, okay,
or even local school district.
2%, right? Or 20% means this for Schenectady. 20% means this for Niskayuna, and they're so drastic. But yet, you could jog up the street, right? I'm not in the best shape, but I could jog. So like, how are our realities so different?
Right.
Yeah. So
I saw as well. I was reading in the Gazette. I read it last month, but I saw it pop up again yesterday or the other day. There's a gentleman trying to bring the first charter school here in a while as well. What was the aversion to charter schools? I don't know what your opinion is on the charter school. You were just mentioning obviously that integrating the schools is an important thing for you. What is your take on the charter school?
So historically, I'm not a fan of charter schools. I think that it's a drain on already struggling school systems. And a lot of times charter schools are initially, if I understand some of the history, charter schools were kind of a proponent of gentrification, right? So like neighborhoods would be gentrified, and so people move into the neighborhood and say, well, I don't want my kid going to this school.
That's how it is in New York City,
right?
Sure,
so now then we'll create a charter school here, and now where kids can kind of get cherry picked, and they don't have to meet some of the regulations that the regular public school does, and as a way to still give you that very segregated school right experience while you're living and why the neighborhood is being gentrified. So and then the model kind of switched a little bit, right? Then it kind of made its progression to like, well, charter schools are big business in city school districts where you have large minority communities and schools are underfunded, and so parents, students, community members might not be happy with the education that their child's getting. So the charter school looks like an option, right? So really, when people, whether you're for or against charter schools, I guess the most important thing for me is that I know when someone is saying, I want a charter school, what I'm hearing people say is that I want options.
Right.
And, then the question becomes, well, what do we need to do? And as a school district or any school system in the country, what is that charter school offering that we can't offer our students now? And how do we get there, right? Because that's far more sustainable. That's far, you get a larger reach, and more kids can experience whatever that thing is. It makes it accessible to everyone. So that's kind of right.
And I mean, from all the data I've seen too, like, I mean, it's macro data, but for the whole country. But charter schools perform either at or below the same level as public schools do on a whole. So there isn't like any magic solution. I think what happens a lot of the time is you get parents who try the charter school and they have a good experience, and obviously like that overshines people who, I would say a decent average of people are like, oh, well, I don't like my public school district. People want to complain about that. You know what I mean? So I think that it's a little disproportionate in that regard. And I know my personal take on like charter schools is just like what you were saying, like people want an alternative. That's understandable. But from a systematic standpoint, where if you're talking about bringing charter schools into your city, why not just improve your existing infrastructure? Like, I don't understand, because all you're going to do is siphon resources. It's not going to come off in any even way. Well, you see the numbers on when charter schools come in, and you see that public schools lose a disproportionate amount of resources per child that gets siphoned away. So it's not, again, we're just talking about weakening one area to, give an option somewhere else. And I get where that comes from, but, in some of the data you see on, not necessarily New York charter schools, are not all of them upstate anyway, but some of them, like, the reason they turn me off a little bit is because I think a big part of why people like them so much, like people who don't have kids and like the idea of it, is because they're kind of like more disciplinarian. You know what I mean? Like, and I always try to observe, like, you know, with a critical eye, like changes that happen in school systems where they're trying to, you know, like, well, let's keep it real. We know what the public school system, when it was at its inception, the whole point was we're training workers. That was the goal. You know, you want to train K through 12 so you have a good workforce. That was the initial goal. You know, obviously us now in modern times, we're like, oh no, school can be enriching, the socialization, the culture, the, you know, all the good benefits that come along with it. But we can't forget, like, that is the at base what it is. You're educating your workforce so that you can compete in the world. And that's what kind of creeps me out with the charter schools, because it's like some of them are just like, it's so hyper, like authoritarian competitive in some ways, where you actually, you know, I've seen a bunch of stories like local, I think is it Carver or I can't remember which elementary school it is, but like they're doing all this stuff like sensory training with children that have, you know, having a hard time, behavioral stuff or whatever. And they're trying all these new methods, you know, a lot of this new age stuff, and it works. You know what I mean? Like, and it's like, well, let's go more towards that. You know what I mean? I want less uniforms and regiment, you know, because I went to a private school when I, you know, in 3rd through 5th. Shout out Omar, St. John's. But and you know, I get it. Like, some kids respond well to that. I'm not saying that doesn't have its place, but you know, let's try this other new thing that we're just dipping our toes in here now. You know what I mean?
It's funny. I'm gonna give you just a little pushback on that. You know, because it's like when people, because it's not a new thing.
Well, right.
You know, so it's like, you know, especially working in within through the consulting business in different school districts and stuff. It's like, you know, I would be out of a job if we just kind of like treated kids with the same expectation and respect that we treat each other as adults, right? So it's like, you know, when we kind of like look at what the school experience is for a kid. These are brilliant, dynamic kids, right? Who have like all of these thoughts and all the, you know, they're literally, not to be cliche, but they are our future. And yet we don't create structures for them to exercise those muscles, if you will, in a safe environment, right? Like, so one of the things I tell my students all the time is like, you have to have a certain level of ownership for your educational experience. School isn't something that should be happening to you. School is something that should be happening with you. Right. So you have to really kind of have, and when you talk about like you know, like kind of private schools, right? And people think like charter schools, and I'm making some generalizations here, but like people say like charter schools are, you know, are closer to the experience of like some of the like high-end private schools, affluent private schools. They're not. Those kids in those high-end private schools have so much agency. Right? They have, you know, they are not policed the same way.
We had like 10-person class sizes.
You know what I mean? It's like, you know,
10 of us.
There's like, one of my friends, he went to a boarding school, and he was telling me like how, you know, guys he went to school with, they're like, you know, and all these high paying jobs, and like, they didn't even address their teachers as, you know, Mr. or Mrs. It was like that level. It's like, you're going to come in here and we're going to make, like, you have that level of agency on your experience because it works, right? It works. We don't see that in urban school districts, and especially school districts with predominantly Black and brown kids, because there's an inherent fear of what happens if we don't control our kids, right? So,
yeah, man, and that was something that, you know, when we moved back here. My wife is from the area, but we moved back here, and you know, we sent our daughter is at Yates. She's 6, and you know, people would ask, you know, where is she going to go? And she's districted for Yates, and then people were like, ooh. I'm like, well, what's wrong with Yates? I was like, oh, you know, it's up there by the projects or whatever, and I was like, so, you know, that's the way to, you know, having pride in your school and pride in your place is the number one thing to lift people, and like, you know, really want to go to school. And like you say, you don't want education to happen to you. Right. You know, in instances like that where people are like, well, what are you talking about? We want, you know, this is the school she's supposed to go to. Why would I send her to somewhere else? Or why would I be having negative thoughts to a place already? When at the end of the day, this going to school is about, you know, like you said, getting the experience that you want.
Right. In community, you live here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And you know, and also, right, because the flip side of that coin is then, school system, school district, school buildings, you have to present, deliver a product, if you will, that someone can be proud of. You have to give people an experience that they can, that they want to talk about. And, that's not something, again, that just happens. That's an intentional effort, that you are working with families and parents. You're recognizing that there are talents and gifts in the community, and you're not just, recognizing them, but you're welcoming them in. That whole community school model. These things really work, but the premise there, like the foundation of that is respect and for the people that you're serving, right? Because that's what you're doing when you're a teacher. I work, on community outreach and community engagement, but the truth is, there's no other service industry, and I hate to kind of frame it that way, but schools are kind of ran like businesses, to your point, which is extremely problematic. But you don't hear like customer engagement like for like Walmart, or you hear customer service, right? And because there's power in language. So when you say customer service, means that I'm here to serve you. I understand that I'm obligated to give you an experience that is meaningful and valuable to you.
Right.
I don't just need to engage you, right? Because if not, then you won't come back into my building. And I think because when you don't have a lot of options, right? Then just like any other business, the product suffers, right? So therefore, that's why you'll see people say like, "Oh, charter school, yes, give me another option, give me something else," because right now I'm just getting what the bare minimum of what I have to get, and there's so much more to this.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we could do a whole podcast.
Yeah, that's my passion, bro.
No, I like it. And it's one of those things too. Schenectady is the how many kids are at Schenectady High School?
I don't even
give
know,
or take.
A lot. Yeah. Oh my goodness, man. Like,
You're talking 3,000-4,000?
About 3,000 kids. Yeah.
So of those 3,000-4,000 kids, I think resources and the focus would be better on making sure that the experience there for such a big place is a good one, and refining that, and more options is a good thing, right?
Yeah.
Options is a good thing, but again, you want pride in your place. Excuse me. So making sure that that's in good shape before we start bringing in other stuff.
It's just like anything else, man. People who are in the room, you cannot allow the answers to be outside the room. It's like, if you want options and we should be able to provide you options within these walls. We should be able to do that, right? And if we can't provide it within the walls, then who do we need to partner with outside the walls and the community that can help us provide you with these options, right? Because and that's being culturally responsive, culturally sustaining. Now, you're bringing community members in with expertise. I'm gonna tell you about Schenectady, man. We are a place that is rich in caring people. That's just the truth, man. So we just have to be better at saying, you know what, there's value over there. Let me go talk to this person, and let me not do it in a very performative way to check boxes, but really honor and value what they're bringing to the table and demonstrate that on how I interact with them.
Excellent. Yeah, that would be a good segue into us talking about you running for city council. Did you want to talk about the other parts of what you had there?
Let's roll right into it.
Let's roll right into
the race. We're at a good point right here. All right. So the race itself. So there are currently 7 candidates running for 5 open seats in the Democratic Party primary in June, and 3 of them are held by incumbents seeking re-election. I believe it's Porterfield, Mutuvran, and Karen. I forget her last name. ZW. Yeah. Yep. I remember her. How is I wanted to ask you. So how are we? The signature drive is going better this time, right?
Yes. It is. And again, man, and even last time, it's important that we recognize that there are people. These were registered Democrats, right? Mm-hmm. Registered Democrats whose signature was challenged, and ultimately resulted in me not being on the ballot. So that was something that was really shocking to me, because this was for the Democratic primary, right?
Right.
Like, we are Democrats. We believe in open, fair elections. That's like one of our values here. So how does this work in this way? And, I learned a lot. I'll say that, Ben.
And yeah, just for context, we're talking about in 2017, right? Correct? When Damonni ran for city council the first time, right? It was first run. Yeah, it got to one of the other city council members brought it to court, correct?
I want to be really, really clear and honor the weight of my words. So what I'll say is that in that first time running, I was really engaging non-traditional voters, right? But they were still voters. They were still Democrats, and I was doing things like, hey, you know what? I'm going to come to you, because something that bothers me, and I get off on a tangent, pull me back now, okay? But something that bothers me is that, you see, it's election time. People need signatures and things. So people are knocking on your door. Hey, how's it going? And, but then when it's time, like when, it's budget time or things that are consequential, how can we never get that level of community engagement, right? When,
we're just reading statements in the paper.
Right. Like, so it's like, so I was like, I'm not going to run that type of campaign because that's not who I am, And so I think, people got a little nervous and, started, really we're going through the law books and saying like, now how can we weaponize this here to get somebody? I mean, so like at one point they were like, well, if they're a registered Democrat, but their address, doesn't match the address that we have on the voting rolls from 6 years ago, then, their signature doesn't work. And it's like, how many people, you register to vote, right? Young, and then you move across town. We have a very transient population in Schenectady, and it just so happens that our transient population is disproportionately people of color, right? And it's like, how do you expect people? So now, it's like, oh, it's not an issue now, but it was an issue then. So it's just, so it's one of those things that, So to be fair, there were some signatures on there that definitely were like people that, registered as independent.
But there were more than enough of just, like you said, just address issues of the person that still lived in the city and was a registered Democrat, and it still was thrown out, right?
If you go back to the book, the little book you sign in when you go to vote, you're like, okay, but that's them voting here, last year, right? So,
and that's what, and me and Pat, we talked about this offline, and if you want to get into this and open it up real quick, and then we'll come back to the race, but. I take a lot of issue with that. I've been extremely critical of the New York Democratic Party in general with closed primaries. I have a huge issue with that. That is a form of voter suppression. No matter how any Democrat or anyone independent, however, tries to frame it, it is by definition voter suppression. Because here's the idea, right? So you're Damonni Farley, right? All kind of people in Schenectady. If you have a Republican that lives down the street from you and he likes you and he wants to vote for you, he should be able to at least get you on the ballot. It shouldn't matter whether he's in the Democratic Party, because you know what? If that's the case, if you let anyone that lives in the city be on the signature, he might switch his party to Democrat to vote for you. That is democratic by definition. Why are you going to continue to box people in with and this is my big theme of everybody's hiding behind procedure all the time. I take big issue with this, and we obviously talked about, who's more likely to, move every couple of years? Renters, low-income people. That's not the case in some of these Woodlawn, Niskayuna. This is some of these rules only apply to certain areas. They're only an issue in certain places. You know what I mean? So again, we're talking about just structural inequality in our electoral system on the local level, the county level, and the state level. But I just wanted to say that piece to give some context to people.
I do appreciate that. Yeah, for clarity. So so yes, the signature process is going well. I'm getting a lot of people. It's just different though. With COVID, it's just different. So there's a lot of people who people don't want to really answer their doors. Not that people are like thrilled to answer their doors all the time anyway, right? So like one of the first things I say, I'm like, I'm not selling anything. You know what I mean? Like I promise you that that's not what I'm here to do. But there's a real legitimate concern. So we've taken precautions. Like I said, we have like our obviously our mask, our disinfectant wipes and hand sanitizer, and after signatures we're wiping pens down and switching them out. But so it's interesting, I'll say in that way. But it's going. All things considered, it's going well. Yeah, people are responding.
And so, obviously, I'm from Ireland, like I said, and we have people from back home who'll be listening to this. Can you kind of give me an idea, if you were to kind of describe Schenectady politics over the last, 30, 40 years, what sort of breakthrough things have you seen, or how would you kind of describe how Schenectady politics has been this last 30, 40 years?
So that's a tough question to answer. And I say that because, Schenectady politics, it's very closed off. It is a good old boys club. It's been for a long time. Mm-hmm. And in order to, when you're someone who's from the community, of the community, the same politicians that like celebrate you when you are, doing a community event, or that you're creating programs to help the youth, they'll come, they'll take a picture with you and smile. Mm-hmm. And then you say, hey, and they'll appreciate what you represent for the community as long as they can leverage it. Right. But as soon as I'm like, okay, hey, now I'm going to step up in this community that I love and work and represent, I'm going to try to represent them in the seat. Then it's like, wait a minute, now those same people, the same ones will say, well, let's make sure that we put a whole bunch of hoops for you to jump through, right, and make sure that we, at every turn try to create a pitfall to kind of take you out right, of the running. So yeah, so that's kind of like Schenectady politics. And so I remember Joseph Allen, who was the first black city councilman in Schenectady, who is my family, who has passed on. But I remember he was the first person who talked to me about getting involved in politics. Mm-hmm. And something he said to me about when he first ran, he was receiving letters in the mail from the Ku Klux Klan, and I just remember, sitting there and him telling me those stories, and I was like, okay, I really think that I'm, this little bit of, backlash that I might see on Facebook, or somebody saying something, negative because they disagree with one of my positions or something like that. I think that I can handle that. Man.
Right.
The trailblazer gets the thorn, and he got a lot of them, and it makes me think about the giants. The shoulders I stand on. We really do stand on the shoulders of giants. So when we say like Schenectady politics, how does it look in 30 years? It's like two things can be true, right? It's a closed off, good old boys club. You got to know the secret handshake. Mm-hmm. You have to trade pieces of yourself or your ideology to enter into this space, and then you have giants like him who were experiencing that in a way that I can't even imagine. Right. So it's one of those things that two things can be true, and that's why it's significant and important for me to throw my hat in the ring.
And when you have brave and passionate policies, you carry people along with you. Yeah. You gain more support. Yeah. Obviously, it's the nature of it, but persevering through that, can really be worth it, and it is worth it.
So yeah, here, why don't we shift into the actual policy realm here? So I have here, the Daily Gazette wrote the other day quote, at the city level, Farley said he thinks that the new developments coming into the city should bring a significant drop in people's property taxes, and the neighborhood should see an important improvement in quality of life issues, things like fewer potholes in city streets. Also, city workers deserve to have better pay and working conditions. So just real quick, did you actually say that? Because they didn't quote you in the Gazette. They wrote, Farley said. Yeah, okay, I just want to double check. I thought that was really weird. I just wanted to ask.
So no, I appreciate that, because I have, I have opened the paper and say, I definitely didn't say that. That's,
well, because you're quoted elsewhere.
So it's happened. So I appreciate you making that distinction. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. So, so what would, what I really wanted to ask was, we'll touch back to that, some of what you said in that quote, but just right off the bat, I usually I think it's good when I see people lead off with, what if you could choose one policy on day one, say you win, and you could wave a magic wand and pass something, what would be your priority coming in day one that you think is the most important thing you could bring effect to from the city council seat?
So, it's really would be around stabilizing our neighborhoods, man. With affordable housing, safe affordable housing. and the way it ties into kind of what I was saying earlier, we see developments going up. We see, new apartment buildings and people slap affordable housing on anything, right? And then
Right.
price people that have been in a neighborhood, 30 years right out of it.
Right.
And it's like, so I say that because, I want to leverage that. I want to say, okay, we're putting up a 100-unit apartment complex, and then I want to know who's working there, who is, who's doing the sheetrock, who's doing, where are all those really good paying jobs coming from, right? Where is this workforce coming from? It has to be people in the community, okay? And people say things, well, you don't have a skilled, trained workforce in the community. Well, then I guess we better create one, right?
Right.
Right. And
Right.
that's another people fighting for their limitations when they say that. But so to get back to that, so I'm saying affordable housing. Let's employ people in the community. And then what that means is that, now I'm in the community. So then there's that economic benefit of I pay taxes here. I support businesses here. So, and it increases the quality of life of people that live here. So I always go to housing because it's just one of those things that, it's happening other places, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Like, there's other places that are doing a good job of saying, let's improve infrastructure and let's attract businesses, but let's do this through this very conscious and equitable lens, because these are the things that we value as a community. And if not, that's when you have gentrification, right? When people that are leading the revitalization of neighborhoods are not connected, don't care, don't value the current or existing culture of that neighborhood. Right. So it's like, if I could say, listen, I like what we're gonna do day one is we're gonna look at how we're spending our money, and we're gonna leverage it not only to build a pretty building, but to build a pretty building that
using the people.
Yeah, that allows the people to take full advantage of that. And then, when you look at where's the opportunity for investment? Here, okay? Where's the opportunity for investment? I'm living in this neighborhood 30 years, right? And there's a bid out to build a new building here, right? And we're putting this up. Where's the intentional effort to say, well, you know what? The community deserves a stake in this. Right. So let's, I think it's called can't remember exactly what the model is called, but
crowdfunding.
But it's more like a community trust. Right. Community trust invest, where it's people who live here own this. There's pride in ownership.
I think they do stuff like that in Atlanta. I'm pretty sure I heard Killer Mike talking about that.
Yes, Atlanta, and I think they were also in Portland. They're doing something like that.
Yeah, they use community banks that they created to do what you're saying. People can. It's sort of like how Lending Club or one of those work, where people put a small amount of seed money in, and then they invest it into the community, building things and all that. And then
the people that actually live there, and again, because what we see a lot of times is very performative ways of engaging the community. And that's what I say. I mean, I don't care how pretty that building is if no one that lives here can afford to live there. Right. And no one that is seeking opportunity in the jobs, don't have an opportunity for employment there, right? I shouldn't have to, as a young man living here or young woman living here, I shouldn't walk past somebody that lives in from Saratoga County here making $40 an hour, so I can get on the bus and go to my job and make $10, and or down to social services, because my options are so limited. That shouldn't happen.
Is that an issue in Schenectady? Is getting around public transport? Do you see that as a big issue?
So I will say, I think it's still an issue, but it's not an issue like it once was. That is an area.
Strides,
yes, absolutely, and it's important that I give credit where it's due. And I think that definitely. As far as our city workers, though, I mean it's bad. When you go other places, man, a city job is something people aspire to, man. There's a level of security, and usually you're making a livable wage, and so people look for those. In Schenectady, we have a lot of turnover. We are constantly paying a lawsuit left to right for something. Right. And again, so I always talk about the potholes, because it's the pothole tells you the story, right? Yeah. That we are not allocating resources in the places that we need to, because if we were, your pothole wouldn't change your radio station. There's a snowstorm, right? Like
Right.
there's a snowstorm every year, right? Like what? You don't have to be able to predict the future. It's coming.
It's just upstate.
Are you kidding me? Why are we not in a position to where, you get a snowstorm and people can't leave their house for 2 days?
Right.
That's crazy, you know, and it's not a slight to our city workers, because we have extremely hard working men and women out in our city doing these things, but they don't have the proper resources, have not been invested in order for them to do their job the right way. So it's like, that's why a pothole looks like a pothole, but it's not just a pothole.
Right.
You know,
It's a symbol of other things that are
right. And there's potholes everywhere. But man, if you tell me, if you're listening to this on the radio and you're driving through Niskayuna, you'll know when you get to Schenectady, because you're, you know what I mean?
Right.
You don't,
Yeah.
So yeah.
And it's funny, I'd say, as someone who's like obviously not from here, Schenectady, obviously it was once a glorious place. There was so much, back in the day when GE was founded, you had Schenectady, the locomotive company, whatnot. In terms of the potential of a city like this, I always, and I talk to my wife, and she's probably sick of me talking about it right now, but like with the advent of COVID, and you had people working from home, you had people kind of wanting to get out of your traditional big cities like Boston, New York, places like this that are 2 hours, to, was it 2 or 3 hours to Canada? And then you're 2 or 3 hours to New York City, 2 or 3 hours to Boston.
Yeah.
It's a good centralized area. Infrastructure-wise, in terms of the way the city is spread out, it's quite good. There's a decent highway that'll take you in and out of it. So the potential, and the why I'm really interested in like the county legislator and like the city council positions is, having outside of the box thinking around these type of things. And I'm not talking about bringing in outside investment or anything like that, or outside people. I'm talking about the people of Schenectady, because there's a rich history. Even the houses that, you go up and down State Street or Union Street or not, any of these houses, these neighborhoods, there's a uniqueness to them.
Absolutely, man.
That needs to be heralded. And, you don't have to go far, either block, to see beautiful houses, beautiful architecture. Even the way the boulevards are set up in some of the areas too, it's like a cool, unique Schenectady thing.
Right. Yeah.
And I'd like to see that be heralded more so than bringing in, one of the things I've noticed in America is you can travel on highways, you go to any town, and there's a uniformity to the way they look. They'll have similar types of shops. They'll have your Walmarts, your CVS's. Everything will kind of look the same. And that works back to the whole pride in place thing.
Right.
Where you're from, you should be really proud of the resources that have been put into it, because that shows the city cares for these neighborhoods. And then the same point, you have that level of uniqueness to it. So I'm really optimistic about at least the potential of it. And now we'll see about the implementation of these outside ideas. But we're glad we could have you on here to talk about these.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. I'm happy to be here. Yep.
So here, I think this is a perfect pivot while we're on the topic of, resource allocation. I wanted to pivot over here to, touch on what was obviously a huge flashpoint in Schenectady last year. Obviously, we had the George Floyd protests happen, and it touched us here. I was involved with some folks. We Impact Us. Shout out Kaheem Priest. Peadar was there with us a bunch of times. So I wanted to lead into, there still seems to be, I'm still paying attention to local coverage of this. There still seems to be quite a gap between what the current administration and activists and community leaders, where they're viewing things on the Police Reform Commission. So what insights, if you have any, do you have into this process? And, what would you add to the discourse from, having some bully pulpit on the city council? So
I participated and led some of the demonstrations here and uprisings in our city. So when you say like activists, like some of the things that, people are talking about is really just like common sense stuff. It's not even like radical by any nature. So one of the things that are in the paper recently was like certain members on our city council were saying that they didn't want people who were convicted of a felony to be able to serve on the police reform board. you know, and it's just like,
Doesn't make sense.
can you, right?
Doesn't make sense.
So, you know, after, you know, because listen, you know, paying attention to local politics, you know, sometimes, you know, you can almost start to go, okay, I know I'm going to hear some crazy stuff. But even that one, for me, I was like, what?
What year is it?
Well, so what you're saying is like so like now we have, unfortunately, you know, the governor had to say, okay, you have to reimagine, you have to reform, you know, this is what it has to look like. Too bad it costs so much blood in order for that to happen. Mm-hmm. But we're here. And we're here because the system is inherently racist and flawed. Then we're saying, well, let's create a pool of, get together a group of people to help us reform it. But let's use the same matrix, the same flawed matrix and the same, you know, measuring of human value, dignity, and input to say, well, if you are the person who's have been impacted and are most likely to be impacted again by reform, we can make those decisions for you. You can sit it out. And it's like, how is that crazy?
Right.
Like, how crazy is that? It's like it reinforces the us versus them mentality of, you know, you can't sit with us, even if what we're talking about or deciding on is most likely going to impact you. You still don't have a voice here. And that to me is just absurd, man. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you know, to answer your question, you know, that's what I would be, you know, number one thing I'd be looking at and saying, like, I'm glad that we're here, but if we're going to do this in not a performative way that just looks like we're checking boxes, we're going to go talk to people who've been impacted and say, hey, how could your experience been different or been better? You know, and, you know, I'm somebody, so I've worked with the police in Schenectady on several different initiatives, and you really have some great people working, and you know, and they would tell you like, well, yeah, I want to talk to the guy that I don't get to talk to. I want to talk to the young lady that I usually don't get to talk to, because the first time we should have a conversation shouldn't be in the midst of a crisis. Right. And I bet you if we start from there, that alone, right, generates a type of relationship where we can start to align our interests and be like, okay, yeah, I can see your point, and I'm trying to get there too, because we all want safer communities, right? So it can look like this, but to kind of start to put up walls, if you will, immediately, and start to be selective around, oh no, you can come, but you can't.
I don't understand that. Yeah, I don't understand it.
And like what you were saying too, like Schenectady, if you look at the data on it, is actually really uniquely positioned for that kind of community involvement, what you're talking about, because we actually have a disproportionate amount of officers who do live in the county compared to like Albany and Troy. Like, you know, I think it's like somewhere it's under 40% in Albany that actually live there. Well, right, but at least, but I'm saying Albany County, 40% of theirs aren't even in the county. You know, I believe it's under 40%. So at least we have a head start in that regard, because that right there, like what you mentioned, is a huge building block of, you know, do they live here? You know,
that's a huge step.
I say that with our police officers, with our teachers. I mean, think about it. Think about, you know, these are upper middle class paying jobs, right? That people are coming here and they're working, and then they're taking that back to their community, and they're supporting, you know, surrounding cities tax based and surrounding city school systems, when, you know, we should, you know, really be incentivizing and designing something that keeps that dollar here. And not only do you get that economic benefit, but when you want to talk about community policing in a more organic way, when you want to talk about building meaningful relationships with students and families in an organic way, you know, there's something that, you know, reason why, you know, I enjoy my job so much, and something that's been such a benefit is that my students know they're going to bump into me at Price Chopper. I'm going to see them at the gas station, you know, and there's that level of like, you know, we're in this together because we are together. Right. That there's a shared accountability, if you will, that we could really, you know, that I say would absolutely transform some of the systems that we have and make it better.
And something you said earlier, you know, I've had a unique experience in that I've, you know, come from somewhere else and seen how America treats, you know, people of color. You know, I was lucky enough to be able to, when I came over here first, I lived with, you know, a wealthier white host family. And then I went and lived with a middle class white family. So I saw that experience. Then I lived at a soccer house in Connecticut with, Jamaicans, Colombians, and I saw how that house was treated. The police were called. I saw that I spoke to them, and it was when you come to this country, you have a movie, like a Hollywood movie type version in your head of what it's going to be like about the shining light in the hill, right? I've talked about it before, but the reality of it is, things like the Voting Rights Act and Civil Rights Act are not that long ago. So it's naive of us to think that, that way of thinking is going to be changed between now and then. And that's just the reality of it. So when you talk about systems like policing, now my father was a policeman, a guard. Now, policing is a little bit different, than we don't carry guns, but you still have to, it's a thankless job for the majority of the time it's thankless. But he was a community policeman. And he was a community policeman in one of the roughest neighborhoods in my hometown. And he was well respected because he didn't go in there with the fear, of like, I need to arrest somebody, I need to do this. No, he went in there, he talked, he got to know the families. If he could help them in any way, speak to the mothers and fathers, to the sons, the daughters, and how he could help them in any way. Policing in America seems to be so heavy-handed the majority of the time, and they play on the fear. And I have friends who are policemen in different areas in the United States. And like I said, it's a thankless job. I understand it, but the way to really propel better policing forward is obviously making sure that they're well trained. It goes beyond saying that a policeman in Ireland should be trained more than a policeman in America, because first of all, you guys carry guns, you come across people with guns, so the level of how bad things can go.
Maybe you want to make sure that we talk about what that means for you, right?
Exactly.
Life and death for you,
right? But working within the community, getting to know the people you're policing is such a big thing, and I that's one thing that I would say I hope Schenectady, if it's not already, is really trying to propel.
So I know. So there's been some efforts on to try to diversify the police force as well. Again, I think so you take about these two very large, impactful systems, schools, police, that leave the largest footprint in any community, if you will. And you say that, we're trying to diversify them so they're more representative of the people that they're serving. It's one sure way to do that is for when the young people in the community are growing up, they see their community members in this role because it makes it attainable, accessible, and it makes sense for me now. Where a lot of times where it's a lot of people, first time I see a police officer is when I'm getting pulled over, when there's some crisis, when there's something going on, and it's and it just kind of reiterates that us versus them type of thing, and it's so detrimental to the community. So I was extremely disappointed when Democrats on the city council started to talk about, people who have had a felony shouldn't be able to participate in this process.
That's a head scratcher. That's a head. Because if people really truly believe in rehabilitation,
right?
That's someone that you should value being on.
Right, and
probably one of the most valuable voices.
The reason why we're doing this is because we know that this is there's bias and it's a flawed system. So how do we say that the system's so flawed that we have to mandate to fix it, and yet we're going to select people to come fix it on the flawed system's recommendation, right? So it's it's just crazy. How do you do that? So I was really disappointed in that.
And I just want to say too, how when we segued into this whole topic, just a general my opinion on it. It's a huge shortcoming of Cuomo and the state at large to basically just be every locale you have till April 1st to do something. There's a ton of stuff that they could have did off top. You could have banned chokeholds. Qualified immunity. Let's not, God forbid you say those words. But there's a lot of top down stuff that obviously could come from the federal and state level. But to just kick that off after all of the, the conflict and everything that happened that summer, it was super irresponsible, regardless of how people feel about Cuomo or our state assembly or any of that. For them to not even try to take a whack at it and just kick it off and dump it on local people is that's just a disgrace in my opinion.
And it's kind of dishonest too, right? Because it's like, well, it's done under the cloak of community empowerment. It's like really what it is that that's a big job, and I'm not ready to take on that heavy lift. So we will empower you. By the way, like the budget for the reform board in Schenectady is like $1,000 or something. So it's like, you know what I mean? It's like, what? Like,
we'll empower you by letting you try to figure it out.
Because you don't have enough to do during a pandemic anyway, right? Like, but let's so yeah. I mean, you really people. Unfortunately, you could tell what people care about when you ask them to write a check, and I think that if we're going to really make some headway here, we have to invest in figuratively and literally too. We can't just say like, let's get together a group. Let's put our money where our mouth is and really support the efforts.
Yeah, I think in this age there's been a lot of conversations. People have a lot of conversations, and that's kind of like you said, it's a little bit performative at times.
Man, it's so dangerous.
It is
dangerous.
Yeah,
it's dangerous, man. There's nothing more dangerous than a room full of good ideas, man. Because what we end up doing, we leave that room, we're kind of like patting ourselves on the back, we start to check that box of, hey, we did that, but we really didn't do anything.
The hard part
Where's the measures,
then,
right? How do we know, and so in order to really have actual change, it has to be sustainable. In order for it to be sustainable, we need to allocate the appropriate resources in order for that to happen. One of something that was really rewarding for me over the summer, I went and spoke. I did a restorative circle with candidates, the graduating class from Police Academy. They're going into the cities, and so it was really good. We kind of had some real honest conversation, but I was talking with the guy there that runs the academy, and he was saying, he said, I've been doing this a long time, and we're changing things. He said, and now there's things that's popping up, and I'm just going like, I don't know how we continue to do this. And the example he used, like some of the training scenarios that they put the officers through, like no matter what you do, if you follow procedure and you check this and you do this and that, the person still ends up shooting you, right? Like no matter what, you cannot win, right? And he's like, what is that doing to the psyche of young people that then we're saying, oh, here's go in the community. It's like, how do we, we are preparing them for war and then putting them in the community. Well, who are they going to wage war on? Right?
Yeah.
The community, right? So it's like, it's those type of real honest conversations that then turned into saying, wait a minute, we have to change the way we're doing this. Those are the conversations I'm here for. Those are, those are the things,
And, and that's what again, that connects back to what you're talking about, like police training. There's only so much of that comes from the top down. You know what I mean? Like, that's why it's so ludicrous that they're just like, oh yeah, you'll figure this all out yourselves. A ton of funding comes from the state in that regard, federal funding too. The guidelines for police training and all this stuff. It's not just Schenectady like writing their own manual. That's not how this stuff works. So it's crazy that it's just like, okay, you Damonni, Jamaica, you guys go talk with the police chief and hash it out. It's like that's only gonna get so far when when there's no actual legislation. You know what I mean? You can't ameliorate an entire systematic breakdown with conversation. You just can't. And, and I'm not saying that there isn't any room for, obviously there's, like you said, there's a ton of value with, the people who live there and the people who are tasked with that job of, being police. There's a ton of value in that conversation being had. But at the end of the day, there's only so much that you can do without your legislature president. You know what I mean? And that's a real conversation that no one wants to have. You can't just have the executive, which, the mayor, the police chief, and the people in the room. Everyone needs to be there. And, I feel like that's just like a huge missed opportunity that I haven't heard anyone say. And I remember just sitting there thinking about it when these reform commissions, I was like, well, where is everyone else? You know what I mean? Like, there's more people involved in this that actually have the ability to make some change, immediately. And I don't see them being asked anything by the press. I don't see them here. What's going on? And I'm not saying that, Peadar knows, he hears me get on my high horse. I'm I'm not here to like take shots at certain local politicians or whatever, but it's like, man, you know, if you hear this, come on, like, you know, come on down. Like, everybody's here. People are willing to have these conversations. I would argue we're talking too much and nothing's happening. You know what I mean? But if we get some folks in that already hold some office, you know, we can possibly make something move. You know, it seems like we talked about this on, you know, a podcast in the past. Like, it's almost like everyone's just looking to cover their own side. Like, no one wants to stick their neck out and be a change agent that does wield power already. It's always people staring from the outside, trying to reach at it to grasp it for themselves and make the change because they have the clear-eyed view of what needs to happen because there is no self-preservation in it for them. Right. You know what I mean? Like, we need to see some courageousness out of the people that already wield that sword. You know what I mean? We need that. And that's why I was excited to have you on, because you have no issue speaking to, you know, what your beliefs are. You're clear about what, you know, where you fall ideologically on issues. And
I mean, I refuse to win something that I have to lose myself in, man. Like, you know, I'm a father, you know, you know, my sons watch me, you know, you know, my wife, you know, bless her heart, puts up with me, but would be like, you know, I'm lucky and fortunate enough to have those checks. You know, I have people, I don't have yes men around me, right? Yeah. You know, and so, you know, anytime that, you know, if I ever started to veer off and, you know, I'm going to be checked, people around me are going to say, that's not what you said, bro. And, you know, and I'm like, I'm so thankful for that, because it's important that you have those people around you to keep you grounded. Because like I said, there is a toll. It comes with a cost. I don't want to romanticize this political journey at all. You know what I mean? So, and you have to be willing to pay that cost. And, you know, when you expect it, when you understand it, and you're like, look, I'm going to go through this, you know, win, lose, or draw, you know, maintaining my integrity of who I am. And, you know, the other benefit is I'm from here. People know me. I'm, you know, if I'm tomorrow acting brand new, people will be like, what? Like, what the like, oh, that's not Damonni, you know? Yeah. So it's like, you know, yeah, so I'm fortunate.
And that's good. I mean, I know that this city council and the legislative as well, I want to say, is the most diverse candidates they've had in a long, long time, if not ever. Do you see that change coming sooner, or at least that change? There is no that change, but do you see the right changes happening sooner rather than later? Has things kind of sped up with the whole George Floyd protests, you know, all the BLM stuff? Has that really put a rocket under people to actually do stuff?
Yeah, it has. And again, so I go back to the two things can be true, because that's concerning to me, you know, because I'm grateful that people are kind of, you know, starting to approach us with some level of urgency, but, you know, urgency can't replace intention. Right? Intentionality about how we build sustainable processes, you know, because what goes on is that we go, okay, let's go, you know, if you just look at, you know, who the party, the Democratic Party, but, you know, if you look, you know, before, you know, this year, like, you know, who were they endorsing, right? What did it look like, you know? And it's like, if you're doing it now, I have to question why. I'm going to say thank you. I'm going to say I'm glad that you're at a point where you're starting to really, you know, put some actions behind your words and your values around diversity and inclusion. But it makes me think, well, how long is that window going to be open before it's not cool anymore, before it's not a fad anymore, before it's not going to help your approval points in the polls? And then what does that mean for the lives that, you know, that are at stake? So I'm grateful to see people are moving the way that they are, but I'm cautiously optimistic, and I'm also mindful that your why is important. Not just what you do, but why you do it is very, very important. And if you're doing it for a season instead of the reason, then we're all going to be in trouble.
And it's important, I think, as well, that, you know, you are a community activist. So if you can, you know, get those people involved who wouldn't typically be involved in the process in the electorate, then that'll change the whole way people have to pander to people.
My favorite thing, you know, people ask me like, what, you know, what do you like about it, about politics? And it's not a lot. I'm gonna be honest with you. And I tell people all the time, I was one of those people that said, I don't do politics until I realized I don't do politics, but politics was doing me, and it's doing all of us, right?
Yeah.
So but the people, the non-traditional voters, right? The people who are kind of like, have some simple sense of disenfranchisement, like even after it's just like, what does it matter? Came out and supported me. I mean, I was on a third party line, and we could look that up because I don't want to. I want to make sure I get this right, but we brought out like record numbers on a third party line for a city council in the history of Schenectady. So that was really good, But so there's people out there, if you're talking their language and they know, like people know that with me, you might vote for me and you might disagree with me on something, but I'm still going to tell you I disagree with you. That's kind of something like that happened earlier today. But it's like, I'm going to be myself and you're going to know where I stand, and people respect that. So I guess the larger point is that, so the downside of that was, and then you had people that are coming out and signing petitions, and those were the same people whose names were kind of tossed out. Those are the same people who were kind of like, it reinforced to them like, your voice doesn't matter.
To be even more disenfranchised.
And these are the Democrats we're talking about. You understand what I mean? So it's sad. Sad situation. But I'm extremely optimistic. The support is rolling in. People are emailing me. How can I help? I'm trying to be really mindful that, again, that, our why, we keep our why in front of everything we do. And, the why is to improve the quality of life of people, the material conditions of the people that live in the city of Schenectady. So I don't want people to risk their safety, a whole bunch of people going door to door trying to balance the fact that, hey, yes, we definitely need this number of signatures to get on the ballot, but I don't want to, put people's health at risk. So,
right.
So I have one final question in closing here. We're getting close to our time. So
I got time, and I'm here. Give me that cup of coffee now.
It's getting dark out. But so no, I just wanted to ask you just like sort of a strategic question here. Okay. So are you, when you like, obviously I understand what it is, but I'd like for you to explain it to the audience of what your motive is, or if it's just purely strategic. Do you want to seek the Democratic Party line just because of the nature of the fact how people vote in local elections, just straight D? Yeah. Or because I know obviously you had no problem pivoting to the working parties line.
No, absolutely not.
Right.
So this go around, I didn't even seek the nomination through I didn't go to like the interviews committees and say, nominate me, because I think that the best endorsement that you can get, the one that matters the most, is by the voters, right? Mm-hmm. So that's why I'm saying, okay, let's have a primary. And to ensure that that's going to happen, I'm not even going to go and seek the blessing of the good old boys club, because then no. I don't want to be a proponent of that. I don't even want that. I want to say, even if you were going to say, hey, and people did tap me, hey, you brought out some really, really impressive numbers on the third party line. We want to, you should be looking to get endorsed. No, I don't want to do that, because I want to make sure that people are directly saying that we want Damonni in that seat because he represents us. I don't need a group of 10 people who been in politics for 30 years and haven't, done much to change a lot of stuff to say, okay, we'll give you our blessing. Because if I get that blessing, I got to be a little bit worried about how I got it. You know what I mean? So I'm kind of like, so yeah. But I definitely, people do that line voting often. I was a line voter. I did it myself for some period of time until I became a little more educated about it. So there is a strategic piece there, but to kind of offset the strategy, that's why I did it. I want to have a primary because I feel like that allows me to use that strategy, but also operate with integrity. So people are coming out and voting for me directly.
Right.
Yeah, and it also gets you out there. Just in like people know you and FaceTime.
Right. Listen, man, there's something to be said about, coming up the ranks, kind of taking the long way, man. You know what I'm saying? There's something to be said about it.
Makes it worth it.
Yeah. And which is why people also like, kind of get freaked out, because they're like, man, if we don't give him this, when he gets there, he doesn't owe us anything, right? You know what I mean?
You don't owe anybody anything but the people.
But the funny thing about that, if you know me, that wouldn't have mattered anyway, right? So, but okay.
You're sleeping good at night. You don't care what they say.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
And I mean, it makes sense too, right? This current political climate we're in, especially in New York, the Democratic Party at large is definitely reeling. You know, you had a ton of downstate obliterations. AOC opened that gate, a ton of other people. Now, granted, larger races, but I think that the party at large in New York understands, even at the local level, you know, like what you're saying, like, oh, we probably should just like, you know, try to snatch up some of these folks that are a threat. You know what I mean? There's a certain level of co-optation that is a definite strategy you can see, you know, even on the national level. Like, look at Chuck Schumer. What was I saying? Like 2 episodes. I was like, well, he got bit by like a radioactive socialist spider or something. Like he's literally just like, wait, what did AOC say in 2017? Copy, paste. Like, we're at that level now, you know. So the Overton windows just slamming left, and I love it. I'm here for it, and
I'm glad that you're here.
Yeah, man. Thank you, man. Yeah, I'm glad to be here, and I think that you know, there's something to be said about, you know, really encouraging people to become civically engaged, and again, I'm not the guy you see during election time, right? I'm the guy you're going to see all year round, and I have, you know, fortunately for me, people know me. They know my record. They know what I've done. You know who I've always been. So, you know, you don't have to like trust the smiling face on your porch, you know, this month. You know, you can look back and go, yeah, that guy's been in this community for a long time, and he's always, you know, been pretty consistent, you know. And plus, being from here, like, again, it's like, you know, I'm a real person. People know that, right? You know, I tell people all the time, I said, you know, it's not that I don't have any skeletons. It's just I don't have any closets. Right? It is what it is. Like,
they're already out.
Like, it is what it is, man. And I think that you know, that's what helps me, you know, be authentic and operate with integrity. And so I don't have to use that traditional playbook because it's not for me.
And I think, you know, one of the last things I'll say is I think what has happened with, you know, having such a, you know, a person like Trump in office, what has got a lot of people politically active, right? So I'm excited about this next generation. You know, the cliche is like the people who are the future.
Some
the
things
younger
are
people.
a cliche because they're true, right? That's
true.
why they're said
Yeah.
time and time again, right? Yeah.
But this younger generation, they're organized.
Yeah.
They have strategy around, you know, getting out the vote,
Right.
you know, and getting things done. And there's a level of fearlessness to what they're saying too.
I love it.
Yeah, and that's what makes me excited about it.
Yeah.
So again, Damonni, thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thank
We'll be on the lookout for you. We'll probably see you at a couple of these events once we can get out to them.
you guys should host a candidate forum, man.
oh yeah, no, that's one of our next steps. We're gonna Omar, we're gonna be reaching out to you soon, brother. And that's one of our aspirations is we'd like to dig deeper into local politics to really, you know, give a platform for you know, folks who want to come have a real conversation like you just did, separate them from those who don't, and give the citizens an opportunity to hear a real long form conversation and where you stand on things.
Don't ask for permission, man. You know, that's what this is about. It's about just being who you say you are, showing up, man, and authentic in an authentic and meaningful way, because that's how we get results, man. So yeah, I'm happy to be here. Definitely. furtherwithfarley@gmail.com. I should say furtherwithfarley@gmail.com. I can also on Facebook. Damonni Farley and Further with Farley pages on Facebook as well. Maybe when you post it, you could throw some links in there so people know how to get in contact with me. So yeah, man.
You have any events or anything coming up, or anything that you're doing that you want to highlight?
So we're gonna start doing signature Sundays. You know, where people can kind of come up. We're gonna have places in the city where people can kind of drive up. You know, socially distance, get, you know, sign and because, you know, it is difficult, again, to get to people during COVID, and we really, really want to respect people's health, and we don't want to jeopardize people's health in order to go through this process, which I really, you know, wish we could have had some changes that made it less a situation where we had to kind of expose people. You know, I think we could have done a little better with that as a community and as a state, and I think that, you know, but again, we're going to be doing some signature Sundays. You know, it's up to us to kind of. So my team been like thinking like, how do we reach people without, you know, while prioritizing their health. So that's kind of just we're being
cool,
trying to be innovative with that. So yeah,
you doing like churches and.
Well, you know, I think, you know, I'm trying to you know, because the churches and stuff like that, you know, there's that separation, quote unquote. We want to just honor that. So my thing is like, hey, like, I'll be at this corner and this corner, and I'll be right here.
Between two churches.
Right. And pull right up, and
Nice.
and we'll be able to do it like that. So yeah, so that's what we're prioritizing right now, is getting the signatures, and registering people to vote.
Yep.
Registering people to vote, man. That was another thing. A couple people who were recently registered. Last time when I ran, their signatures were disqualified also. So it's like, again, we just have to give people a reason to show up, and kind of combat the disenfranchisement, and just say, yo, we're here, we're gonna really get the work done, and I obviously can't do it without people. So
Awesome.
yeah, man.
And do you just real quick want to give people a reminder about what to sign and not to sign if your name's not on?
Yeah, thank you. So how the process is set up, there'll be people coming around with their clipboards, and sometimes, well, let's see, for the most part, there's like 5 names on the petition. So if you sign, you just sign for all 5 people that are on. So, it's not like say like you wanted to support one candidate, but maybe not another. You can't sign for that candidate unless you're signing for the other 3 or 4 endorsed candidates. This is really a bad way to do it. I mean, it's strategic. It works great for the powers that be, right? Because it's like, we one sign, we get our slate in, but it's like, again, you would think in the Democratic Party, we'd be a little more mindful about saying like that voter's choice, that empowerment of our voter in it, but it doesn't really work that way. So if you sign a petition for the other incumbents and endorsed candidates, you can't sign my petition because it won't. You can't sign both. There's only so many slots. So yeah. And I should also clarify that I'm running for a 4-year seat. Right. I'm not running for a 2-year seat, because people think, city council race is city council race. No, it's not. There's a special election, and I intentionally did that, even though it requires likely a much higher voter threshold. What that does is that opens up space for young new voices and people who with similar ideology that I have, and I'm not competing with them in that place. We need to really compete with the people who allow tradition to stifle innovation. We don't want we want to encourage that. So that was intentional on my part.
So you're targeting the incumbents.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's it's important, because this is the type of climate, this is the type of thing that encourages people to be their best selves, right? So if you're an incumbent and you've been on the city council for 4 years and you haven't been walking your neighborhood but now you're walking and people are going, oh, I think I remember you, but they're like, oh, I know that guy. He was doing this and doing that for all these years before any political interest. You're in trouble. So you should be worried about that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, man, hey, I appreciate you coming
Thanks
down.
for having me,
Stay
man.
in touch. We're going to link
Pleasure.
back up.
Absolutely,
Have a
man.
good
Honor,
night,
yeah.
folks.
All right, man. Thank you.
Take it easy.